Let's walk through one of these sense organs from start to end. Okay? Eye. Usually I have to put labels next to my drawings for obvious reasons. What is this now? An object. It's an object. Nothing magical. Very logical. It's an object. Light rays that emit from the object, that there's some light source somewhere, right? Light rays which reflect off the object. You know, it falls on the retina, right? And then you have the optic nerve, which carries an electrical impulse. Now, here's a very interesting part of this anatomy and the physiology and how things work. These are questions that you never stop to ask yourself. If you did, you would have realized who you are or what you are. But because you never stop to ask these questions, you thought you are who you think you are, but you're not really. Think about this for a second. This is what? Light. Okay? Here's the object. Light is reflected, falls on the eye, and you know this is an upside down thing that goes on here, right? At this point, this is a nerve. It's a nerve cell. What do nerves conduct? Light? Ah no, it's sound, isn't it? What do nerves conduct? Nerves conduct an electrical current. That's what nerves conduct. They conduct electrical currents. So the point at which a nerve picks up this signal, it is no longer light, isn't it? It's no longer light. Do you agree? The point at which a nerve picks up this impulse, it is no longer light. So I'm going to ask you a question now, which perhaps we'll answer much later in our discussions, but I want you to start thinking about it. Is it the object that you're really seeing? To see the object, you need light. Yeah? Because light is what helps you see. Where's the light after this? Where's light? There's no longer light. What's there? An electrical current. So are you seeing electrical currents then? Is this an electrical current? Are you seeing what you think you're seeing? This is a bit deep, but a bit heavy. That's why I need you to pay attention. Okay? But I'll break it down. I'll say this as many times as is required. But this is the profound teaching which will help you to understand what you are. Because so far you think you are whatever name you give yourself, and you are a self. Soon enough you'll begin to understand that you are really nobody. You're just a process. Here's light. You know, how far can you bring this object to the mind? How far can you bring the actual object to the mind? How close can you bring the object to the mind? Can you bring it, the closest you can bring the object is only as far as the eye. You can place it right up here, in front of your pupil, but you can't take it any further in, can you? So when you say that you're looking at this flower, are you actually looking at a flower, or is it simply your mind interpreting as it knows the object that it is looking at? Are you seeing a flower, or are you just interpreting it as a flower? Think about it. Let me continue this journey just a little bit further. Here's the optic nerve. What's this thing? Come on, most of you have one. What's this thing? The brain, right. So we have the visual portion of the brain at the back, right? So that's the visual center. So the nerve comes and connects this place. This is why, I think most of you know this stuff. This is why if someone hits you on the back of your head, you see light. Yeah? So see, if you can see light just by hitting the back of your head, do you need light to come through your eyes then? Think about this before you answer. If I can strike you on the back of your head and you will see flashes of light, you can see flashes of light simply by doing that. Do you actually need light to enter your head, through your eyes for you to be able to see? For you to be able to see something? Do you? Do you understand my question? Is it a requirement that light enters your eye for you to be able to see something if I can simply strike you on the back of your head and you'll still see light? Is it a requirement that light has to enter your eye? Is it? No, it's not. Clearly it's not. You don't necessarily need light to enter your eye because the same thing can be done by simply triggering the nerves at the back of your brain. So here's what I want you to think about at this point. Are you actually seeing the object? Are you actually seeing the object, or are you simply seeing the product of a process? This is too deep. I can go back a few steps. But it's okay, let's serve it all and then start eating it over the next few weeks, right? Little by little we will eat it and then you can regurgitate it when you get back home. Right? I've always asked you to, have a little discussion with your family, at least, on your way back home, as you're driving down, what was that rubbish that Swaminathan went on about? He said, I can't even see. I'm never going back there again. That's okay. At least say that. I'm helping you to figure out who you are. You learn some of this for science, but not in the way that I'm explaining it to you. That is why this sounds a bit alien to you. This is science, yes. It is a process, yes. But I'm asking you to look at it from a different angle, a different lens, a different perspective. Ultimately, I'm going to bring it down, I'm going to distill it down to the point where you begin to question your very own identity. Am I who I think I am? It's going to get there eventually, but let's not worry about that just yet. So, nerve cells bring the message to the optic center, and from there on the brain picks it up, and now the brain starts working. Now, so you might ask a question, and it'd be a very valid question. Swaminathan, if we are talking about the mind, what's the connection to the brain? Why are we talking about the brain? The brain has a very intricate connection with the mind. I'll give you a very simple example of that. So I'm bringing bits and pieces from everywhere as we make this journey forward. Okay, so from time to time, like on the trip to Nuwara, right? You stop by some place, you get off, you go and see, the waterfall, and then you carry on again. You stop for a cup of tea, look at the scenery, and you get back into the car. And that's how you make that journey, right? The same way, as we make our journey to our destination, from time to time, we will get out of the car, go and have a bit of a walk, enjoy the scenery, take a few pictures, and get back into the car and carry on. Makes the journey worthwhile, doesn't it? So you can enjoy. You're taking the scenic route, if you like. This is the scenic route. I was going to say, I can't remember what I was going to say now. What was I going to say? How do you know, right? I didn't say it. I was going to say, I was going to give you an example. Yes. I remember. before I forget. I was going to explain to you that the connection between the brain and the mind. Have you ever seen someone who's drunk? Have you ever been or seen someone who's drunk? Why are some of you looking down? Come on, look up and answer. How do you know when someone's drunk? You know when someone's drunk when they start saying things like this. I can walk straight, but the road is crooked. That's when you know they're drunk. You're asking, why can't you walk in a straight line? I'm walking in a straight line, the road is crooked. It's not straight. That's why I can't go straight. I'm trying to show you the connection between the brain and the mind. What does alcohol do to you? It doesn't affect the mind, because the mind is an energy. Alcohol is matter. Alcohol is a liquid. It cannot affect your mind, which is an energy, but what it can do is affect your matter, which is your brain. So when you put alcohol into your body, it gets into your blood system, and it travels to your brain, this wonderful organ that it is, and it starts changing the chemical balance. Okay? Now, why is it when someone's drunk they can't walk in a straight line or stand up straight? Here's the answer. Remember what the mind is? It is the instrument that perceives. How is it that right now you can stand up straight? Because your mind perceives the environment around you relative to the knowledge that it already has. So when you stand up right now, ladies and gentlemen, you see that the hall is flat, the ground is flat, right? Everything is upright and straight, and I'm also standing up straight. This is why you stop when you are upright. You don't carry on after you're upright, right? As you try to stand up, right? The first movement you make, of course, if you are sat down, you bend perhaps your body forward, to get the to pick up the what's the word? To get the motion up and running, right? So to get the impetus, you stand up, you bend your back forward, right? And then you move your legs forward, perhaps, or your legs backward, and you hold the armrests, and you push yourself up. At that point, you are something like this. So if this is the chair, you do something like this. To stand up. Once stood up, you stop at this point. So what was like this before, right? As you make yourself upright, you stop at this point, don't you? And you know that is upright. You don't carry on after that, do you? And go bending backwards, wanting to stand up. You don't do that. Why do you not do that? You're a machine. Think of yourself as a computer. Why does the body stop at this point? Because the mind stops at that point. What the mind knows is this. The mind knows that I am now upright. Because it checks its environment, it sees that the floor is flat, right? And there's a liquid on the insides of your ears that says you are now level, right? And this is part of your biology that you will have learned at school, right? Your ears, there's a liquid in there that helps support maintaining that steady balance. So here's what happens when you take alcohol. Now, this is where, say, your ear is, and where you have the liquid. Okay, that's your ear, in where you have this liquid that helps you maintain your balance. When the ear tilts, so this is when it's standing upright. Here's when it's tilting. Now the body knows that I'm either tilting forward or backwards. Okay? When it does that, it carries a signal. These signals are carried to the brain. So the brain interprets the messages carried from that organ in the ear to perceive, to interpret whether the body is standing upright or not. And once it receives that signal, it sends its message to the mind. The brain sends a message to the mind. It sends a message to the mind to say, you are now standing upright, at which point the mind stops movement. Now, you couldn't move any part of your body without the mind actually giving a command. Okay? So, now, say you wanted to raise your arm up. The only way you're going to do it is if you think about it, right? If it's voluntary, you have to think about it. If it's involuntary, okay, let's say it happens without your will, but if it's voluntary, you have to think about it. So, how do you know your arm is not already up when I ask you to put your arm up? How do you know that? Let's say your thumb, right? I ask you to raise your thumb. How do you know that your thumb is not already up when I ask you to raise it? Because you check the stimulus that comes through your nerve cells into your brain, and the brain drops a message onto the mind to instruct it, the thumb is flat. So therefore, if you wish, you can lift it. But once you lift it, now again the brain picks up this message and delivers it to the mind to say, now the thumb is up. So therefore, when I ask you to raise your thumb, you don't keep going all the way back. You stop at that point. Because imagine if the mind didn't know that your thumb was up right now, what would it do? It would keep on sending signals to the thumb to keep on lifting. And at some point, you're going to cause yourself some damage. So there's this connection between the mind and the brain. The brain interprets the environment. Actually, the brain is an interpreter. If you had two people who wish to speak, two people who spoke a different language, and one person who spoke both languages, what would that one person do? They would mediate this conversation by interpreting it two ways. That is what the brain does. The brain is connected to your sense organs. It is also connected to the mind. What the brain does is sitting in between. It translates messages from your sense organs to the mind, and it also translates messages from the mind back to the body. So from body to mind and mind to body, the brain is the part that does this translation. It's a fantastic translator, and it works so incredibly fast, but not fast enough. The mind is always faster. The mind is faster. That is why when when you have to listen to things, when you get to listen to things, there's always a moment, there's a gap between two sounds. There's a gap between two sounds. So there's a frequency difference. The mind makes up for that. The mind can make up for that. Because the ear doesn't pick up sound at the same rate that the mind can process. But the mind is very good at it, so therefore the mind fills up the gaps. Because the ear and the body is not fast enough for the mind. This is a much slower processor than the mind itself. But the mind is super fast. Coming back to this, I was going to explain to you why people can't stand up straight when they're drunk. And therefore the connection between the mind and the body. When the brain is intoxicated, when there's alcohol in the brain, now these chemical balances have completely gone AWOL, right? It's completely gone off. So these chemical balances, because they've gone all funny, right? The brain now sends all sorts of weird signals to the mind. If the brain's job it is to send signals to the mind based on what the sensory organs are bringing it, but because remember it's an interpreter, but when the interpreter goes mad, now what might happen? Then the message that is being translated is not the right one. Yeah, so let's say there's one guy, there's another guy here, and there's another guy here. Okay? Say he speaks Arabic. This guy speaks Chinese. This guy speaks both. Now here's the interpreter. All right? What is the risk that the person who's speaking Arabic either gets or doesn't get to convey the message to the guy who speaks Chinese? What is the risk here? The interpreter. If the interpreter does a good job, then they will both speak, conveniently, and they will convey the message as expected. But if the interpreter starts either, mistranslating the message, or introducing things of his own, right? If he starts putting in his own ideas, his own thoughts into the message, now the message that is being translated is not the right one. This is like a man-in-the-middle attack, for those of you who are interested in computer science. Right? This message is now being altered. Okay? So the same thing happens when your brain gets intoxicated. The brain's job is to translate messages from the body to the mind. The body being this guy, the mind being this guy. The brain is the organ that does this translation. But what happens when the body or when the brain gets intoxicated is it now introduces signals of its own. It now introduces messages of its own because there's alcohol in the brain. So messages that didn't come from the sense organs are now being introduced here. Therefore, that message is altered. It's adulterated. So what is put in here is not what is going out here. And therefore, backwards as well, what is going out here is not what's going out here. Therefore, when standing straight, what should the brain be telling the mind? I am standing straight. Yeah? But what does the brain actually tell the mind? You're not straight. So what happens, here's the question. What happens when you're standing straight and you think you're not standing straight? What do you try and do then? What do you try and do then? You try and stand straight, right? But you already stood straight. And then when you try to stand straight, what happens? You fall. Because you are straight, you are stood up straight, but you think you are not, and therefore you try and make an effort to stand up straight. Then what happens? You fall. That is why when someone is drunk, they can't stand up straight. Because their brain, which is intoxicated, introduces messages and signals of its own into this process, and therefore the sense organs or the body and the mind are not able to communicate properly. So that is the connection. Long story short, that is the connection of your brain and your mind. Without the brain, you couldn't survive. The mind wouldn't be able to do much at all. But without the mind, there's no point in having a brain. So the brain and the mind are not one. So here's where I want to bring our conversation to. The brain and the mind are not one. Okay? But the mind is not in the heart either. Otherwise you could ask the question, what happens when we do a heart transplant? Are we now getting the mind of the person to whom the heart belongs? This is why we come back to the statement I gave you last week. Let's not worry too much yet about where the mind lives. What is more important is how the mind works. Because it's not because suffering is not a result of not knowing where the mind lives. That is not what suffering is a result of. Suffering is a result of not knowing how the mind works. If suffering was a result of not knowing where the mind lives, then the Buddha's first instruction would be, here's where the mind lives. But the Buddha didn't speak of that much. What he taught us was how the mind works, because that is what a suffering is a result of. When we don't understand how the mind works, we suffer.